see that we have a quorum. So I want to call to order the Williamson County Budget Committee meeting for April 27th, 2021. This is an electronic meeting, and this meeting is being held in pursuant to the Executive Order number 78 from the Governor of the State of Tennessee. As such, all members of this committee must be able to hear me and each other. If you cannot hear other committee members, please notify us immediately. Without objection, the Budget Committee hereby determines that meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. This meeting is available to the public on Public Access TV and is streaming live on YouTube. Can Budget Committee members hear me and each other? Is there anyone that can't? All right. Next up is roll call. We have the Open Meetings app there. If we will load the roll, please, and press your button if you're present. And that's correct. I show 4 members present. Commissioner Morton is absent at this time. He may join us later. We have no minutes for today, but we do have 2 transfers. First one up is from Property Management, and Kevin is on the call. This is a transfer of $168,801.71 from land to other capital projects. I'll entertain a motion for approval. Commissioner Herbert, and a second, please. Commissioner Sturgeon. All right. Kevin, would you just give us a quick summary of what we're doing here, and then we'll see if the commissioners have any questions, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Committee Chair. This transfer will enable us to replace both AOC Board of Education elevators. When we bid out the elevators quite a few months ago, we did an alternate bid for the second elevator. Both need to be replaced. Not sure where our money was at the time with the cost of construction. Well, it came back very, very good. And with an additional $168,801.71, we're able to do both elevators. The benefit to this is multi. For one, we're a heck of a lot of savings with the same company deployed one time, back-to-back replacements, the same elevator, the same equipment, and then working in the same penthouse up top. So really, it'll standardize both the elevators. Very well needed to be replaced. They're both early 1970s elevators. So we're very excited about this if approved. Pending your question, sir.
Thank you. Please note that Commissioner Morton has joined us now, and I have a question from Commissioner Sturgeon.
Yeah, hi, Kevin. I'm just wondering, it says land. That's where the money's coming from. Is there something that we're not doing in exchange for this?
No, ma'am. Basically, this is some money that was available after we purchased Beasley 305 warehouse. We got that at a less rate than what they were asking. So we had some excess funds available. And so these funds are available to help augment another capital project. And that's what Nina and I had talked through, and that's our request, ma'am.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Herbert, was that your question?
I can't find my unmute button. Yes, that was the same question I was going to ask. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right, if you're in favor of this transfer for $168,801.71 for property, push your yes button. If you're opposed, your no button. Record the vote, please. And that passes 5-0. Thank you, Kevin. Next one up is from Solid Waste, and I think someone from Solid Waste is on the call. This is an $8,000 request from diesel fuel to other items, which is on the transfer sent out today. I'll entertain a motion for approval. Commissioner Herbert, and a second, Commissioner Sturgeon. I don't see Nancy. Someone from Solid Waste on the call, just a quick summary. Okay, seeing that this looks pretty self-explanatory. Nina, do you have any other information?
No, sir, but the funds are available for the transfer.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions? We might find somebody that can answer that. No one have any questions? Ready to vote on this transfer of $8,000 to Solid Waste Department? If you're in favor, push your yes button. If you're opposed, your no button. Record the vote, please. And that passes 5-0. Thank you very much. That's all the transfers I have today. What we want to do is move on to the general fund of the school system and their capital projects. Some of you were on the Education Committee meeting last night and had quite a few questions, so I'm sure the school representatives will be able to answer those. Note that on our meeting, our last joint meeting on April 6th, we passed the cafeteria budget and the after-school budget, but we did not pass the operating budget. And so I'd like to get that on the floor. You have the booklet, you have the extra items that Ms. Farmer sent out. And unless there's someone here that hasn't received those, she is on the call and can send those to you. Okay. I'm assuming everyone's got those. Yes, Commissioner Sturgeon.
Yeah, you're talking about the document that I just got at 3:00, right?
This came to me last Friday. And then
What came today then?
Commissioner Herbert asked them to send the capital improvements details.
So we're not talking about the one that came today. We're talking about what came out last Friday.
Well, this is a follow-up to what we first discussed on April 6th. And then we're going to continue that discussion. And then we have the capital request. And this is a lot more detail that Ms. Farmer sent us at the request of Commissioner Herbert. That's what you got today. A lot more detail than we had earlier.
Well, I've been using the binder that I drove
Yes.
in and picked up. Is this adequate, or is there a newer version that I need to be aware of?
Some of the questions that we had from April 6th were answered in the email that came out last Friday from, let's see, who that come from?
Yeah, let me-
And Ms. Farmer. And then the capital budget, which we'll talk about as a separate issue, was attached to that. But your budget that's in front of you, what we discussed on the 6th is what we're going to start with. And then we are aware that we do have to make an amendment at some point for the health insurance increase. And there may be some other things as we continue discussion we can talk about.
Yeah, I have what came today from Ms. Farmer,
Yes,
but I don't have anything from last Friday.
okay.
I don't know why. It's probably
Okay.
my fault. But I just want to make sure I have the same documents that you have that we're talking about. So,
Okay. That's good. I think Rachel, if you're on the call, the memo from April 23rd, could you send that to Commissioner?
I'm emailing it right now.
Thank you, Rachel. Is there anyone else that doesn't have that in front of them? Okay. Now that explains some of the questions that were raised on April 6th that this committee raised along with the Education Committee. All right, Commissioner Sturgeon, I'm going to go to Commissioner Herbert. She's got a question before we get a motion this on the floor. Commissioner Herbert.
Okay, I guess I've got some questions about the capital budget. Do we need to get it on the floor first before I start asking more detailed questions?
Yes, I would like to get the general operating budget on first. Have a motion for that, the
Okay,
$412 million. Get that up,
oh,
then we'll look at the capital as a separate item.
okay, I didn't know, I thought we were doing capital first, sorry.
Well, if there's the wishes of the committee, we can. I thought we'd just finish up our work from April 6th, but if there's others that'd rather do capital first, I'm fine with that.
okay. Hey, Paul, I think I have the document. It's rather lengthy and I feel kind of like I haven't had any time to understand it. So could we please use page numbers so that I can follow the conversation?
Okay, I think we can do that. That's not
All right,
gonna be a
thanks.
problem. Okay, if someone can speak up, I was gonna go through the general school budget first, the $412 million budget, and then come and do capital second. If we want to reverse that, I'm fine. Just would somebody let me know what we want to do. We can be flexible.
I guess I'd like to do capital first and get it out of the way because the
Okay.
other one's so much bigger and more complicated.
Okay, I have no problem with that. Is there any objection to that? We can follow Commissioner Herbert's suggestion. Seeing no objection, all right. So we have the capital budget in front of us, and this is a total of $10,213,666. And this was sent to you as well last week. Do I have a motion? Commissioner Herbert makes the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll make a second. I'm not able to access it. I'm going to get out of open meetings and pop back in to see if I can get a second button, but I'm happy to
Okay.
second.
Our assistant is made the second by Commissioner Morton. All right, what I want to do is to the schools, I'm not sure which one, if Mr. Golden, Ms. Farmer, anyone else with the schools wants to go through the capital budget with us, then we'll ask questions.
Commissioner, this is Jason Golden.
Go ahead.
I'd be happy to start. So we presented our annual capital budget to our board at their April meeting. They've approved it. We presented it to the Education Committee, and Commissioner Herbert actually asked for some additional detail at that meeting. So I wanted to make sure those of you who are on this call know that that's what Rachel Farmer sent to you. She sent our internal detail. So that's what Commissioner Sturgeon was mentioning, that was a result of the question from Ms. Herbert. So that's why you've got all that detail mixed in. So as Commissioner Webb mentioned, the total capital budget request for this year we are asking for is $10,213,666. It basically includes three what I think of as buckets. One technology, two maintenance, and then three safety. And there's a little bit of overlap between whether something is safety technology and safety maintenance. But those are the three department leaders who work with Mark Samuels, Rachel, and me on putting together those annual requests. And we actually have it broken out in what I think of as two ways from a grid perspective. The overall items in the categories, for example, maintenance, floors, electrical, HVAC, those kinds of things. And then second, we have it broken out so that you can see a look as to whether this is general or rural. And just as a reminder, rural is for our K-8 and general is for our high schools. And that's because of Franklin Special existing in the finance structure that the county and we have to have based on Franklin Special's existence. So that I want to make sure you guys had that reminder of the finance. So last
Mr.
year
Golden,
we made
just a second.
Yes, sir.
I told Commissioner Sturgeon I'd keep her up. This is what he's referencing. Commissioner Sturgeon is what went out Friday. This is black and white with the Williams County Schools letterhead. He's on pages 10 and 11. That's
Found
it.
it. Thank
You
you.
found it. Okay, thank you.
I really appreciate that, Paul. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Golden, continue.
So we have those broken up into categories, and again, we've given that extra detail. I do want to mention to you a couple of items that I mentioned to the school board just for ease of reference. When we say SFMO in some of that detail, that's State Fire Marshal's Office. So we do have a lot more State Fire Marshal's Office items in this year than I typically see. A lot of it's related to door and door hardware in safety issues there. And also there's one reference, if you really get into the detail, where it talks about repairing a sinkhole, and that is at Grassland Elementary, and that detail is not in that document. And we just happen to know that, off our heads, that detail that we provided is internal for our purposes. And so sometimes that detail for somebody else to look at it might not be as obvious. We last year made a request for a little over 13 million in capital. You all approved, Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was either 9.3 or 9.8.
9.9.
9.9. Okay, thank you. In total capital, our request this year is 10.2, and we're open to any questions that you may have about any particular project.
Thank you. Commissioner Sturgeon.
Yeah. Hi, Jason. Are you saying that the sinkhole at Grassland is in the details or it's not in the details?
Well, there's in one of the detail items, it's referencing a sinkhole repair, but it didn't mention a school.
What page is that on?
You know what? I can't even remember, but it's a $75,000 repair. And again, it's in that internal detail for our work that we forwarded on because Commissioner Herbert asked for some detail.
If I may,
I think it's on the bottom
Mark,
of page
I'm
3.
sorry, Mark might have it.
on the document that was sent out this morning. It's page 3 of that document. And
Yeah,
it's
I
the
just
last-
found, when he said 75,000, I found it. It's kind of hard to jockey all these documents and the meeting on one computer. So I'm sorry if I'm slowing you all down.
Oh, no, that's fine. And you know, what Rachel's trying to do, what we're trying to do is when questions come up, we try to make sure we get the answers to you. And there's always that risk that it's a flood of information in a format that's tough for you to see because we end up working on it, you know, and sitting for hours, you know, at tables going through every item. So I get that.
Any follow-up, Commissioner Sturgeon? No, okay. Commissioner Herbert?
Okay, the itemized statement on the capital projects that basically answered all my questions except for 2. And one is, I noticed in that money we had designated for previous capital, you used it for Chromebooks. I thought we already appropriated a lot of money for Chromebooks. Can you explain that a little more?
Mark, if you would give detail on that, we used some appropriated money, we used some federal money, plus this for all the devices. Mark?
Oh, yes, sir. Commissioner, what we had to do last year when we had to do remote schools and be prepared for that is we, instead of coming back and asking for more money than we had already been granted in the capital list or the capital that we're executing for this year, we went ahead and used a chunk of that money to go ahead and purchase Chromebooks up and above what the commission had already given us. And so some of these items on the IT side were items that we would have purchased last year, but we did not. We focused that on Chromebooks. So that explains that. Or does that explain that now?
Yeah, okay, thank you. And I've got one more question. Can any future stimulus money be used for this capital projects toward it? And do you know if you're getting any future stimulus money, except I'm not talking about some for the cafeteria or that?
Yeah, so there is what's called ESSER 3, and the Commissioner of Education had a meeting yesterday afternoon with superintendents, and she said that they have gotten a 100-page guide on what and how that money can be spent. And so at the state level, they're working on that. They have projected we are to get about $5.3 million in ESSER 3, and we have not designated any funds yet. The general information we've had from the state as they are starting to work on the federal is that there are going to be requirements that be used for what they describe as learning loss. So short answer is we don't know the detail yet of that, but we know based on the way federal funds are always structured that we can't supplant. In other words, we can't use new federal funds for existing projects to replace expenditures. But what we hope is in the next few months, we're going to be able to grasp what that can be used for. I'll give you an example that we've heard from the state. The state is funding, based on the legislative action in January, what they call summer camps, which are really full-day summer schools. They're funding that with part of their money, and they've set a structure for how that's going to be funded. But we anticipate, just based on life experience, that there are going to be some additional expenses that the state's not funding directly. We will likely need some of that ESSER money for that, but that's not going to, at least in this first year, going to be anywhere near that 5.3 million. Short answer to your question, which you guys know I never give, is there is some more federal money coming. We don't know the details yet about what we're going to be able to spend it on, but the general phrase they've used for us is learning loss that we'll have to pinpoint and get approval for.
Thank you.
That's what I was afraid it was. Thank you.
Mayor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Golden, can you give me an update on what we're doing to better improve our technology for those kids that are out in the rural area and some in not rural areas? The complications we've been having. I know that United and Middle Tennessee Electric have purchased Crystal Clear, which is over in Tollgate, and 2 or 3 other communities. But are you doing anything at all to help some of these children that are not able to get some kind of access so they can do their homeworks?
Yes, sir. We are, and of course, you're right that a lot of it has to do with internet access in individual homes. We have purchased some devices called Kajits. That happens to be the brand name, and they're in essence hotspots to work off cell towers. There's a monthly subscription fee for those. And I can't remember, Mark, the exact number that we've passed out, but it's in the low thousands to students. Those were critically important, especially the first few weeks of school, and especially with the high case numbers that kind of peaked around Thanksgiving time, and the hundreds and even a few thousand students and faculty that the health department was quarantining during those times. We're still using those in places. But our online numbers went down, and the times where students have gotten quarantined has slowly reduced. So our main one is hotspots using cell towers as an alternative in those areas where the cable and other internet access is not there.
Mr.
Mr.
Gold.
Golden, if I might add, Mayor, we also have been running bus services during remote days for those students to actually get to a school so they can connect, whether it was a remote day or a flex day. So that's another alternative that we provided for those families.
Thank you.
Mayor,
I just appreciate Mark and Jason, you all reiterating that, because I'm not sure everybody on this call realized what all the commission voted for last year. It was several dollars to buy those hotspots, whatever you call them, Kajis or what. And the bus route, that was very important. I just think it's important for those people that are on this call to understand just what kind of commitment you have made, but thank you.
and Mayor, you and I have talked about this. Those spots in the county are really all over the place. They might be on a hill in Brentwood where you don't have access. They are really, from our perspective, unpredictable. And so the utilities in their work over these next few years is going to be significant.
Mr. Golden, we just finished talking about Chromebooks and hotspots. As you get back into live classes, what's the plan? Will these devices be used, continue to be used by the students for homework or other assignments, or will they be turned back in?
Every student will have a Chromebook device, and our plan is we've got them, and it makes sense instructionally for them to use them and keep them. So we plan to continue to assign those to students. That's worked really well. We had in our strategic plan for that to happen. Obviously, it happened quicker than we intended. But our plan is for them to have those from now on. I think the world's changed, and we took a leap catching up, maybe a little far quicker than we intended, but we're there.
Thank you. All right, we're discussing the school's capital budget. Any other questions of the school staff? Hearing none. Are we ready to vote on the request of 10 million? Let me ask one more as the chair. Nina, funding for this bond issue, or will we have to wait a bit? You want to weigh in with any comments? Ms. Graham?
These requests are usually rolled into our fall bond issue.
All right, thank you. All right, seeing no other questions, are we ready to vote on the capital request from the schools of $10,213,666? If you're in favor, push your yes button. If you're opposed, your no button. Record the vote, please. And that passes 5-0. All right, thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Herbert, for getting this detail out. That was very good information to have. Now we want to go back to the general school budget, and this, I want to check with Commissioner Sturgeon. Did you get the packet that was sent out by Ms. Farmer last Friday? Have you got that now? Mayor Anderson, go ahead.
I'm sorry,
Thank you,
Paul.
Ms.
Oh, I think I have it, Paul. It's the,
Okay.
it ended on page 11, that's the one we're talking about, right?
Yes, that's the capital requests were at the back of that with an opening letter on the front with some details from our last meeting.
Okay, and that's what we're reviewing right now.
That and the, in your budget book, page 15 is the end page of that where you'll see the total, the 412 million.
In the school's budget book.
Yes, yes.
I don't,
Excuse me, 15. I'm, that's page 15, my bad. Page 15 in the booklet that was provided for us.
which, I'm in section 6 and there's no page numbers. That's extended school program. So
Okay,
what section is it?
This be a section, let me make sure it's section 1. Nope, section 4. Let's see how the sections are. Just a second.
My section 1 is basically just a letter.
Right.
Section
This would be
4.
Section 4, yes, thank you. Section 4, General Purpose School Fund.
Thank you.
All right. Mayor Anderson, you were, had a comment or a question?
Yeah, I'd like to call on Jason, before you go too deep into the budget. This morning, Jason gave some astounding numbers, at the breakfast with the mayors, and I would like for all of the budget committee and those members to hear what he said in regards to merit scholarships, even in a pandemic year, the success the school children have had in the Williamson County school system. Um, I mean, it's just amazing. If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, from him giving that.
I do not, Mr. Golden. And go ahead, because I did see the U.S. News and World Report survey was out, and our schools, looks like we have all of our high schools in the top 20 in the state. Brentwood being number 5, but it's behind 4 magnet schools like Martin Luther and Hume Fogg. So number 5, really number 1 is Brentwood, and number 2 Ravenwood, and I think number 3 Franklin, if you take out the magnet schools. So brag about yourself, as Mayor Anderson suggests.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. And Mayor, I'm going to start, since Commissioner Webb mentioned the U.S. News and World Report. I didn't mention that this morning, but the U.S. News and World Report top high schools in Tennessee actually just came out. And of the top 10, there were 4 comprehensive public high schools in the top 10, and they're all us. The others in the top 10 are magnet schools, or other, where in essence there's an application process, and that is Brentwood, Ravenwood, Franklin, and Page in the top 10. So that was really neat to see, and I actually look at U.S. News and World Report for colleges, but that's really neat to see. So the mayor and I and other county leaders spoke at Franklin tomorrow this morning, and they allowed us each to speak for about 5 minutes. So I was speaking really fast, and Dr. Snowden spoke as well, and what I reminded everyone of was WCS's mission, and our vision statement is to challenge students to excel in academics, athletics, and the arts. And I gave some examples. And what triggered us looking at this was just 2 weeks ago we hit TCAP. TCAP, T and Ready, in the course test, the state testing. And a year ago, nobody even took those tests. Because the governor had closed school down, and we looked at it as a really major milestone. Even in a normal year, that's a milestone because we do all our scope and sequence, we do all our teaching to the standards, so that students can show what they've learned. And we went back and looked and reflected on the year, and I gave some examples of what our students have done academically in athletics and the arts this year that are pretty incredible. So first. We had over 50 National Merit Scholars this year. This is the 3rd straight year that we've had over 50 National Merit Scholars in WCS. And those are those big scholarships really based on how students do on the PSAT as sophomores that end up, generally speaking, getting those full ride scholarships to college. Over 50 for the 3rd straight year. We have had 41 students score a perfect score in the ACT. That's our highest ever. And again, a perfect score on the ACT. Many of us can, I'd like you to just figuratively raise your hand. How many of you had anybody in your schools that were getting perfect scores on those standardized tests when you were in high school? Pretty incredible. And we actually had some sophomores score perfect scores on the PSAT as well. And I mentioned that. And those are some examples. And my reaction when I saw that is those are great in non-COVID years. We have exceeded and sustained and exceeded where we were in past years, even in a COVID year. Those are things we'd celebrate even in a non-COVID year. On the athletic side, we already have 8 state championships. Last year we had 7. And the spring sports haven't had their championships yet. And so on the athletic side, it's been pretty incredible. I didn't give some of this detail, but Summit High School had their first state football championship. Fairview High School had their first ever team state championship with wrestling. Cross country wins. Brentwood High had their 8th straight state championship in volleyball. Nolensville High had their 2nd straight in volleyball. And we still have the spring to go. So we exceeded last year already before the spring sports. On the art side, I'm not going to get these numbers right. I think I'm going to be pretty close. We had about a little over 20, I think maybe 27 all-state choir members represented from WCS, somewhere close to 20 all-state band. All-state orchestra, somewhere around 14 all-state orchestra, and there's a new all-state program this year, and it's theater, and we had 12 members of the inaugural all-state theater production. And so when you look at those benchmarks, those points that we look at for student performance towards our vision statement, we're knocking it out in a normal year. Not just a COVID year, and that's part of what I emphasized to everybody this morning. I will also tell you that on the COVID side, we set a goal at the very beginning of this year to be on campus if we could safely do so. And some of our neighbors didn't, and we set up safety protocols to try to maximize that. And we've been able to do that, and we had some rough spots with a number of quarantines and the number of positive cases, especially in the fall. But we fought that battle and kept students on campus. I mentioned that we benchmark ourselves not just locally, and Commissioner Webb mentioned that U.S. News and World Report, where 4 of the top 10 high schools, the only 4 comprehensive are WCS schools in the state. But in part because of that, we benchmark ourselves with other districts. We're a member of a consortium of about 10 high schools that are similar to us, metro areas, high growth, high performance, and we try to learn from our peers. And the geography of that ranges from Metro Phoenix to Metro Chicago to Metro Atlanta and places in between. And we checked with some of our peers about how they've handled COVID. Naperville 203, which is a high-performing school district outside Chicago, just got all their students back on campus about 3 weeks ago. It's very similar to metro schools. Olathe, Kansas, which is a high-performing school district outside of Kansas City, just got their upper grades back on campus about a month ago. We're the only school system among our peers that we've been able to drill down to individual classes and individual grade levels to deal with the quarantines that have been happening across the country to prevent entire schools from going off campus. Now, there are times where we couldn't staff it, but looking back and reflecting, we're really proud of where we are. And that same high standard that we've had and the same high performance that we've expected from our students have been there this year. So that's what the mayor heard. And I will tell you, I also got to listen to the mayor about the amazing teamwork that we have in this community. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the leadership that we've had from you all and from the county mayor. The municipal leaders have done a good job. We feel like we're turning corners every day. We've used the word nimble. Some of the speakers this morning used the term pivot. We think more in lines of being nimble. Long term, I believe what this is going to do for us is going to make us more receptive to student needs. I've made it a focus for our folks, even pre-COVID, to focus on students first, to grow in empathy for our students, and to not go it alone because we have a great team. And I think all those things, all those focus points have in this COVID environment made us better.
Thank you, Mr. Golden. That's quite an accomplishment. And as I said, the other schools, all were in the top 20. I think if I looked at the list, every high school in Williamson County was in the top 20 of the state, which included those special schools like Hume Fogg and MLK. So hats off to you. If I can go back now, to begin discussing this general school budget. Those of you that were on the Education Committee meeting last night, there were quite a few questions. So I think we can get this on the floor and then have discussions. And we do know that there are going to be some amendments. We know that already from Ms. Farmer's memo. So could I have a motion to approve the general, we get the official title here, the General Purpose School Fund of $412,119,851. A motion by Commissioner Morton, second by Commissioner Herbert. If it please the committee, I would like for Mr. Golden and on his staff to take the memo that came out last Friday, along with the original budget submitted, and then maybe some of the questions that were asked from last night's meeting, and just give us a summary, and then we'll come back and ask questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Rachel did send you that that memo last week, working to try to answer the questions that came from that first joint meeting with the Education Committee. But I want to make sure that I'm very clear on this, and because this is fairly unusual, not unprecedented, but fairly unusual, that we do intend to bring the budget back to our board in May, based on the benefits expense that we talked about with a county need, and so that number totals a little over $2.9 million. So we're going to ask the board to amend that. We are going to mention one other item for them in May, and that's our online school. You may recall when we talked about this last month that just a few weeks ago with that first joint meeting. When we went through the budget process, it really starts in November, December. We had budgeted, but without knowing how many students were going to apply for the online school, and so we, in essence, structured it for full schools. The best example I can give you is we have 7 assistant principals budgeted. We're going back through that and reducing the staffing based on what we call our position control report. The number of staff members driven by the number of students at a particular school. And in that particular example, we're reducing that from a budgeted 7 to 2.5 assistant principals. And we're going to be doing that throughout. On the teacher side, I've just, we talked about, having another program, that's smaller than other schools does tend to cost a little bit more when you look at it from a per pupil. Renaissance High School is an example. Any of our smaller schools, the per pupil expenditure is a little bit less because of economies of scale. If you have one principal for a school that has 600 and you have one principal for a school that has 890, the per pupil expenditure for that principal is going to be a little bit more in the smaller school. So I wanted you to be aware of that, because I do know there were some questions about how much is a per pupil cost for online, and we just don't have those numbers yet because of some variables. So on the memo, to answer the questions that were asked at our last meeting, you see the portables. Those of you who've been on the commission a long time, and I've been here 15 years, we've had times where there have been, I don't know, a couple of dozen portables scattered around. You all have been good to us to help us come close to keeping up with growth, and I very much appreciate it. And I hope that we've been good partners with you too in working out how we serve that growth. So right now, College Grove has 2, Spring Station Middle School has 4, and Longview Elementary has 4, for a total of 10. Our goal is ultimately to keep up with growth, but we know it's a constant battle. There was a question about pest control, and we mentioned the fire ants and brown recluse spiders, and so we are having to deal with pest control in that environment. That's obviously a safety issue. OLP projection numbers, to complete that story about OLP, we had planned on it being a program this year and spend this year vetting, actually going through the state process of creating a school. That doesn't have a budget impact. It's more of a paperwork impact, but there are some key impacts on our students because of the existing rules for actually having a separate school. The state board executive director told all superintendents, you can't have anybody fully online unless you have a school this year. So our board approved us applying for a school. We are somewhere around 700 to 750 right now. Students signed up for online. We were at a higher number, around 900, but because we have to actually have a school, we notified those students of that, because TSSAA doesn't have a rule allowing for online students to participate in interscholastic sports at their zone school. And so largely the recent reduction over the last few weeks was related to high school students because of that. Also, seniors would actually graduate from the named online school rather than from their school. So my impression is that those who were thinking that they still wanted one more year of online, but they had some extracurricular plans, have stepped back as well. So we again are going to drive our budget based on actual student numbers related to that.
Mr. Golden, before you move to the next
Yes.
one, of those 700, what's the grades? Is that K through 12?
K-12. Yes, sir.
Okay.
K-12.
Thank you.
Yep. And it varies a little bit. So I'm actually happy with that because online's not for everyone. There are some students who do really well with it, and then there's others who don't, just like any other program. And so I'm pretty pleased that and I'm confident that those who've chosen it have thought it through. But again, we feel like it's especially where we are, it's a necessary program, and I think it's going to survive forever because there is some percentage of our community that wants and needs that online program. We had a long-term plan for that, but last year we jumped into it and jumped ahead of our strategic plan on that item as well. But again, I want you all to know we're going to be careful and conservative in the expenditure related to that.
Okay. Before we go on, Commissioner Sturgeon also has a question before you move to the next item.
No, thank you, Paul. Jason, last time we spoke, the first review, weren't you projecting a lot more online students than 750, like maybe twice that?
Well, yeah, yes, and so I'll walk you through the numbers process. Last fall, we had somewhere around 8,600 or so students online. We allowed for semester choice. This semester, we're at about 5,500. We budgeted for around 300, and then when the first expressions of interest were there, yeah, we were around 1,500 or so. But when the rubber hit the road, we had somewhere around 900 or so sign up, and then that shrunk based on the new information we received from the state. So yeah, we have had that slow reduction.
How did you shrink from 900 to 700?
It's again between I think 700 is probably a safe estimate for where we end up. When we got that notice from the State Board of Education that they intended to not allow an fully online program, it had to be a separate school. That changed the rules for some students because of TSSAA rules. There's no rule allowing an online student to participate in interscholastic sports at their zone school. And the TSSAA is going to review this in June, but there's just no certainty. And so we gave everyone that notice that it's actually going to technically be another school. And that we gave them an opportunity to say, hey, you've chosen this, but the state rules have changed. So we gave them an opportunity to step back. And that was that's what triggered the next reduction.
Are you saying they stepped back because they wouldn't be allowed to play sports?
I think that was a factor for some because the largest number of those who changed their mind were high school.
Okay.
I think, so I believe that was part of it. I also believe part of it was, there's another rule, they will actually graduate from the named online school, WCS Online, rather than from, say, Independence High School. I have a suspicion that influenced some as well. You know,
Right.
what would be on their diploma?
Okay, so you're saying that you're going to cut back the budget for online because there's so fewer students?
Yes, ma'am, because when we started our budget about 4 months ago, we were budgeting for the possibility yeah, well, it may actually a little bit more even with our budget. And so we're not going to have that many. So we're going to be able to cut some positions.
Okay, okay. Thank you. That explains it for me. Thank you.
This is Judy. It wouldn't let me punch in to speak, but I've got just a couple of questions to follow up on that since it's the same subject.
Go ahead.
This paper you sent out on the student enrollment, does it include the online children in their schools they're zoned for? Is that how it is? You don't have it separated, is that right? I think
Ms. Herbert, we actually have, we have the student enrollment projections, the 2020-21, that huge chart that looks like the old distance chart on the back of a paper map. The next page shows our online projections per school. And the left-hand number is actually the state number for the school. So that's actually a printout from our system. The state gives every school a number. So that's not actual students in the left column. Allendale is school number 104 for state purposes. And then the percent from each school of the total online, that shows the percent of the online school that is represented by the students zoned to those particular schools. So as an example, at the elementary, Kinrose represents 15.68% of the total online population. So what we do from there on the budget side is factor which individual student left each grade level, and we base our teacher numbers on the pupil teacher ratio in that school that's left. So I will tell you, just to be as clear as I can, with students pulling from every school at every grade level, just think about elementary alone. You've got 28 elementary schools, 6 grade levels, and you're pulling students from those. It's going to be a rare school that loses a teacher equivalent because we still have to make the state required pupil teacher ratio. But in those spots where we can do it, we will do it.
Okay. And I have another question. What happened to the students? I mean, you were projected, like 1,000 more last year before all this hit. Where are those students? Did a lot of them go to private schools that haven't come back, that are not online or enrolled in our schools? Where are they?
Yes. So across the state, public schools had a reduction, and largely they either went to private school or homeschool. We had a reduction, I'm estimating somewhere around 1,600. We have gained about 2/3 of that back so far over the course of the school year. But yeah, those are the two main sources.
One more quick question. The 2 schools that you have portables at Spring Station and Longview, when you build that new school in Spring Hill next year, will some of those kids be pulled from those schools, rezoned, so that you get the portables?
Yes, ma'am. The main purpose of the Spring Hill School that's actually on the board's agenda, on the commission's agenda, related to zoning, and that's not that's not a budget item, but it is to build a school on Wilkes Lane. It's largely to give relief to Longview Elementary, and we haven't set the zone yet, but that's the main purpose from a strategic planning perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Morton has a question. Commissioner Morton?
Yes, Mr. Golden, what extracurricular opportunities are going to be available for our online students?
So we're working with our online staff to have a number of extracurriculars for those online students to participate. And a lot of that's going to be driven by student interest and capacity. So, you know, even potentially theatrical productions, you know, music clubs, we're going to try to maximize that. There are some online schools around the country that don't do any of that, but we're going to try to drive that based on student experience. Athletics are a no. You know, because of TSSAA, and some of those traditional ones are going to be much more difficult, but it's going to be driven by student interest, and we're working on that right now. I will tell you, Commissioner, that I suspect that a lot of those folks who said, you know what, I don't want to do online, it's because of that, because of those extracurricular activities.
We had online students first semester, and I certainly know the pull of having kids back in school and wanting to be able to participate in things besides just the academic setting are very, very important to families. So
Yeah.
thank you for your efforts.
All right, thank you for those questions. You want to continue on? I think we're up to item 4 on your memo.
Thank you. I'm scrolling back up. Rachel gave you some detail on the average salary rate per teacher, and including benefits, it's right at 70,000. And you can see, of course, you guys know, those of you who have businesses, you know, we pay for FICA and portions of all those additional fees. So Rachel gave you that number. Let's see, next item, cost per student going up. Rachel actually pulled some information off the state website for fiscal year 1920. Soon after that, it got taken down. And Rachel, I don't remember the exact message. I think it said something like, we're working on it. I'm using my vernacular.
Coming soon.
Coming soon. So one of the points that we always talk about is where do we fall on the percentile spectrum, right? So traditionally we've been somewhere in the 40th to, you know, below 50th percentile on per pupil expenditure statewide. We just don't know that right now. Things are in flux, you know, in part because of student numbers. Another key question that the mayor always asks is how many positions are completely funded by the county as opposed to getting state BEP money. That is a confusing element this year too, because the state does that calculation a year in arrears, if I'm not mistaken, Rachel. So can you give them a nutshell of that? And my conclusion based on what Rachel's described is this year's an anomaly and the numbers don't make sense. And our hope and expectation is that when we hit next year, there will be a blip that stabilizes in the coming years. Rachel?
As Mr. Golden said, it is a bit of a mess this year. Basically, two things have happened. It's kind of the perfect storm in that we had a reduction in our student enrollment, which we haven't had in a long time. And so as such, the state and the BEP funding we are getting or have received this year currently is still based on what the student enrollment is. And so that's down. And so our funding went down. At the same time that happened, last year approved positions in our PCR, which is our position control report, went up. But that was approved last year. We did not hire all those positions, but the traditional way we have given you this gap in what's unfunded is based on the PCR and then based on BEP funding. And so what we presented to you is a skew because we are also, if you look at the PCR that we are presenting for this year, we are pulling it back down based on, again, student numbers. We didn't fill all those positions last year. They were approved, but we did not fill them. But traditionally, the way we calculate is based on what is on the PCR. And so I think it's one way we've said it is it's kind of comparing apples and oranges. We can't really compare the two this year because we have those two things going on. We do anticipate that we will be held harmless on our revenue for BEP funding, but we do not have that yet. And we will not get that. Those numbers are going to change right up until May, June. And so as is, I think I estimated to you a better calculation for us is probably about 675 unfunded positions. We originally reported 736. Went back through the calculation once we got our numbers for February, which BEP is based on a few periods, and February is one of those. And that number was adjusted to 721. Is what we would have reported to you, but because of the unfunded, not unfunded, but unfilled positions, really about 675 is where we're landing at the moment.
So to get some longitudinal information, the year before that, Rachel, what was the number? It was 500.
550, 545. Once
So
we
you got-
calculated in June. So yeah, 545.
So you all can see that change in the state unfunded positions. As a quick example, we had about 40 teacher positions this year that were budgeted that we didn't hire because we had a reduction in student numbers. So the unspent revenue is in fund balance and is actually going towards making this upcoming year's budget balance.
So the budget that the schools are presenting, the 412 million, includes 675.56 unfunded BEP unfunded positions. Is that the number you're working with?
That's a rough estimate. Again, it'll change right up until June when we
Right.
actually get our final numbers.
Just looking at what we have in front of us today. So that's roughly $447.5 million of unfunded teachers.
Yeah, and Commissioner, I think also in that memo that Rachel gave to answer questions, that last line in question number 6 is huge to me. The county funds 69%. That's Rachel's projection for this coming year. 69% of our total budget. The state 28% and 3% from federal. And that's not true for every county. The way the state funds, we get less per student from the state than most any other county. Generally speaking, Sevier County and Williamson County get less. And Rachel, correct me if I'm misstating anything, because they project that the counties have a higher capability of generating revenue.
That's correct.
Just as a note to the committee, in talking to county commissioners from around the state when we've had our meetings, this BEP funding is an issue around the state. I don't know how many schools have 675 positions, but in other commissioners I've talked to, there are unfunded positions. So it is an issue statewide. So we're not unique in having an issue, but we may be unique in the total amount. So I hope that we all keep that in mind when talking to our legislators. All right, so I think you've covered this issue. Do you feel like you have, Mr. Golden?
Yes, sir.
All right, committee members, we've had this in front of us. We have the detail that we went over April 6th. We have this additional information. Any questions while we have the team with us?
This is Commissioner Herbert. I don't have a button to press. I've got some questions.
Go ahead.
Potentially, there's 4 million extra BEP if we're held harmless, if that state law passes, right? Is that not correct?
We do not believe we will be held harmless on growth. We will be held harmless on our standard, what we receive with BEP funding, but we will not be given the growth that we normally do get, which is the 4 million I believe you're referring to.
So
Yes.
Commissioner, yeah, so what we've heard, and again, you know, we're a local hearing it at the state level, the likelihood is that they will pass a BEP hold harmless to keep numbers flat, but they will not fund the hold harmless for those school districts that traditionally grow, and that's the 4 million. But to your point, if somehow it happened, that would be 4 million more.
So you think we're still just only going to get 140 million from the state BEP, right? Is that what you're thinking?
Correct.
Okay. My question is, what's your fund balance today?
Good question. Let me see if I can pull you for it. The closest we're going to get to that number as of today is going to be the 29,259,649.
29 million.
259,649.
So we're not any different than we were in March.
That's going to be, no, not really. We're holding pretty steady, because I will also say, and I'm sure the county probably can weigh in a little bit on this. Everything that we would normally have received, not everything, but a lot of things we would normally have information on to make adjustments. We just don't have yet from the state. They are a little bit behind on several areas. And so we have not been able to go in and make adjustments like we would like to, like we normally have been able to. Have even been told, I think this morning I was part of the fiscal workshop for finance directors, and we're told that potentially by the end of this week, we will have more information specifically related to BEP adjustments, specifically related to ADA adjustments. And so, yeah, we are still standing where we were.
So basically, the way it sits, you're going to need 5 million more in increased taxes and another 2.9. So basically 8 million, we've got to do a tax increase for that to fund y'all this year. Is that correct? Is that the way y'all?
8 million is the gap. I do believe that we are going to be able to close that gap. When we first created the budget, the gap was about 5 million, and we felt like we were going to be able to close that with additional sales tax, with additional funding that we think will come in as our expenses play out at the end of the year, and being able to increase fund balance. You know, we're still spending, so we haven't been able to actually get a true projection. We're projecting what we think we're going to expend, but we still have expenses coming. And so we do feel like we're going to be able to close. We felt really confident with the 5 million gap. The extra insurance cost, to be blunt, yeah, that is our gap. That's the one we're looking at. That's where I think we can see where we need you guys absolutely the most.
So if I may, Rachel, I'm going to use my, boiled down terminology. Am I correct that you were projecting somewhere between a 0 gap and a 3 million gap based on everything that you have right now?
That is an accurate statement. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Herbert?
Okay, well, that makes a big difference versus raising taxes for 8 million versus possibly 3. That's a big difference. And in this gap, I complained about how many assistant principals you were asking for, Jason, when we had less enrollment. How much are you going to be able to knock off the budget for deleting some of those?
Well, for budget purposes, we are going to revisit that online, and I think that's the best example for assistant principals. We have a position control report that structures positions based on the number of students, and so on the online, that example I gave of we had budgeted for 7 and we actually are going to need 2.5. The board will revisit that in May. For those others, our existing budget is based on those student positions. When we enter the data with the online students and we pull them, if there is a school that goes below our position control report number based on student withdrawals, we won't fill those positions. My gut tells me those are going to be few and far between because they're going to be scattered over 50 schools.
If a school that already has the needed assistant principals and all of a sudden you lose a lot of kids, will you move one of those assistant principals from that school if it's a big enough amount?
Yes, ma'am. And in fact, when we went through the budget process, we actually had that discussion with elementary counselors. And so we actually did cut a couple of those because our projections didn't include those numbers making. But yes, we will do that for all those positions.
Okay, I think this is my last question. What % of your school budget is special ed, and what percentage is special ed students in the school?
Rachel, the best I can ask is give an estimate because I know you don't have those. We haven't actually done the math on that and separated out all that.
That's correct. We can find that out and I can send that out to you, but it is mixed in at the moment.
I should have asked that by email before because that's a pretty complicated question. All right, thank y'all.
While we, after hearing Commissioner Herbert's questions, this is Commissioner Webb, Ms. Farmer, Mr. Golden, I've heard 3 numbers, which could be confusing. We went from 0 to 3 to 5 to 8. as our funding gap. And we are aware that the 412 will most likely be amended by the roughly $3 million for the insurance. We're factoring that in. We're all aware of that. Can we get some detail? Is it 8 or is it 5 or is it 3 that where's our gap today? We understand it's fluid, but where's our gap today?
I'm not the finance guy, but I'll give it to you, then let Rachel correct me. We are currently at around 8 million. Knowing that we have to add in the additional benefits expense. On paper, we were at around 5 because the board hasn't amended the budget yet. But Rachel projects based on the next 3 months, we are going to likely be based on sales tax revenues and other revenues and closing out certain accounts somewhere between 0 and 3. Including
the health insurance adjustment.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I think with confidence from Rachel shaking her head that we're looking at a $3 million gap that we've got to figure out between now and July. Okay, all right, thank you. Any other questions? Are we still discussing the school budget? Okay, are we ready to vote? This is the $412 million expenditure. We've already got the motion in second. That just popped up on my machine. There we go. All right, if you're in favor of the school budget as presented, $412,119,851, push your yes button. If you're opposed, your no button. Record the vote, please. And that passes 5-0. So Rachel, keep that pencil sharp. And let's see if we can get that down to 0. That would be just super duper. All right. As far as I know, that is all we have from the Education Committee today. We've approved the capital budget and we voted to improve the operating budget. So I'll go, as I typically do, to the mayor's meeting, then a quick update after the mayor. Mayor, do you have anything to add to today's information for us?
No, Mr. Chairman, I do not have anything new today, but thank you.
I would, and you may have some information on this, Mayor. I think Mr. Golden spoke of it briefly. Do you want to, at this point, weigh in on the executive order number 80 that came out from the governor today?
I'll be glad to touch upon that. Effective tomorrow, at midnight tomorrow, we can no longer have electronic meetings in which we will have to come back into full session. Our county commission room has been worked so that there's plexiglass in between all 24 commissioners. We're also trying to decide how to handle the social distancing that would be required when we have people come back into the commission room. I.e., we want to try to keep them separated at least 6 feet, and people will have to wear masks in the area of the sitting area, because the wearing a mask inside the building here in county government buildings is still on. So for you that have become familiar with the executive order on the electronic meetings, anytime we have a vote now, we'll be back in presence. I do think there are some places we can continue to have the virtual platform, but they won't be in a format that will be requiring voting. And most of the other executive orders that have been on the books, mask mandates, things like that, they're all taken off by the governor. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Diane, did I overlook anything? I think they pretty well got it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Herbert?
I just wanted to say it's a miracle. I didn't try to cut the school budget and the capital projects. I do every year. I try my best, but Rachel and Jason, you did a good job. And when I hear getting to 0, that was like music to my ears. Y'all cut it down. All right, thank you.
All right, before we leave, the question's been asked, do we need to take action on the amendment for the insurance, the 2.9 million? Not sure. I'm thinking we need to wait to the school board, but who has some information? I think we need to wait for the school board, but I'm not 100% sure if that's the right answer. Do we have any legal counsel on here, or do we want to look at this, discuss this item?
Mr. Chairman, if I could
Yes,
address it, I normally don't like to get ahead of the school board. We have sent them the request, but that number has to be approved. I guess it's a matter of who's on first and who's on second. Jason, would it hurt your feelings if we went ahead and approved the request for the adjustment for 2.9 million on the health insurance, or do you want us to wait for the schools?
Mr. Mayor, we'd be fine with that. We've given the board a heads up that it's coming.
So Paul, it is something we need to do. It's a matter of when you want to do it. This is a good time to get it out of the way.
Okay, I agree. We can, if the committee is understanding what we're doing, we could wait for the school board, which meets on May 17th, and we would pick this up again at our June meeting. Or we can amend the budget now in the memo that Rachel sent out Friday for $2,973,283. We can amend the school's budget that we just approved to add this to it. If want to make a motion to that effect, we can discuss it at that point. I have a motion from Commissioner Morton. Is there a second? Commissioner Herbert? All right, discussion, please. I think we've talked about it. Commissioner Sturgeon, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to be a clear understanding. Is this a request coming from the schools, or is this coming from HR, or who's making the request?
So
Schools. Okay, Mary, go ahead.
So, Commissioner, this is a request. As you know, we have a self-funded insurance program. All of our costs are looked at on an annual basis, mainly because of our RX cost, pharmaceutical costs. The health insurance went up by $600 per person. And so the P&I, Purchase and Insurance Committee, has approved that. You have approved that in the county general budget. And because of timing and from the P&I committee voting for it, we could get it to the county budget committee, but the schools have not had a chance in which to react to that. Rachel has put together those numbers for the total number of employees, and it's 2.9 million something. We can get there it is up on the screen, 2,973,283. So the way that works, the schools send down to Nina for the cost of the employees throughout the year to pay for their health insurance. So the request is coming from the P&I of the true cost based on the health insurance of the county.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. That helps me understand.
Right. Any other questions? All right, ready to vote. If you're in favor of this amendment to the school budget for $2,973,283 for health insurance, push your yes button. If you're opposed, your no button. Record the vote, please. And that amendment passes 5-0. So now this, Mr. Golden, you can take that to the school board that the budget committee has passed that and makes that approximately $415 million budget at this point.
Thank you.
Just note for the committee, you heard the mayor talk about the meeting room at the administrative office complex. Our next meeting is Monday, May 3rd at 4:30 p.m. This will be our regular monthly meeting. We will be meeting in person in the auditorium. So everybody aware of that? Okay. All right, we've got that out. And at this point, I would entertain a motion for adjournment if no one else has any business.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. And I will second that. And we are adjourned. See you folks Monday. Bye-bye.
Thank you.